the Minnesota Rural Partners was part of a, still exists. We still put out the newsletter every month, the e-newsletter, Minnesota Rural Roundup. But it started as a network of people in Minnesota, all of whom were working in some form or fashion with rural development. So it could be people from the Department of Health who worked in rural communities, or Veterans Affairs, or University of Minnesota, nonprofits. A lot of people work with rural Minnesota. And it itself was part of a network of called the National Rural Development Partnership of other states who had similar networks. And your point was really good that networks are different than groups. Networks are, and networks to work really well, I think, demand a level of trust between people as individuals who are part of that network, to say that, you know, I can call you up and you're going to probably help me do something because we have this mutual interest in helping rural Minnesota. And so the Rural Partners was a network that used all of these points of presence in different disciplines: healthcare, education, economic development, business, but used all those points of presence to mutually support rural Minnesota vitality. And it was kind of a just-in-time sort of network, in that, you know, we didn't have an office. We got together face to face, you know, maybe I think in the first couple of years actually once a month, and then it became quarterly, and had a rural summit that was that brought not only the members of the network together, but, you know, people who were a part of their networks. And I would say that networked leadership is really kind of where things are headed now, because people do have so many different interests, but they can pull together just in time for a cause or a project or an initiative that needs their help, but they don't have to be working on it all the time. And I think that also helps with the kind of varied interests that people have too. But what's essential for that network, or what was essential for that network, and I think what's essential for any network to work well, again, is that sort of trust and loyalty to the other members of the network, that you'll be there for them and they'll be there for you.
I think one of the other things that became clear to me in working through Minnesota Rural Partners was that this, the idea that when entrepreneurship became like more and more important, and this idea that you can't have community development without economic development.
Right.
The way we're going to have economic development was to support people who had ideas, who wanted to create things.
You're right. Yeah. Yeah, when I became president of the Community Development Society 20 years ago, I worked for a year on the speech that I was to give as president, and I came to understand from my own work and from what I was seeing then, this was back in 1993, that that our society had kind of gotten out of whack, that we'd become more market-oriented than sort of civically oriented. And I think our founders really wanted there to be a balance. You know, even Adam Smith, the great father of capitalism, if you read his writings, saw that the American ideal was that there'd be a balance between market and civic society. And so I think that the entrepreneurship movement that you mentioned was in some ways a return to that balance, that if communities supported those that were trying to start small businesses and businesses supported the community, that there'd be that mutual undergirding for both, because you can't run a business without a set of laws that helps there be a fairness for you and for others that are in that business. And you can't run a business if you don't have roads and sewers and schools, and and a community can't support that infrastructure unless there's taxes to help pay for that. My great-grandfather was an immigrant from Sweden, and he always told people that he was grateful and proud to pay taxes because it finally meant that he was supporting. It was a way to support together with others the community needs, and so it's finding that balance. And I think in some of the rhetoric these days, people get off on saying no new taxes and or everybody for themselves kind of an attitude. And I think as citizens, we really have a responsibility to support both our communities and the businesses that are in our communities because they need each other.